Why homeschool? We are Scott and Sidra Morris, and we've helped lots of parents in their transition from public school or traditional schooling to new ways of looking at education. We are going to talk today about why some of those parents that we've talked to, and even us, why parents choose to homeschool. Chime in below. What are the reasons why you're looking at homeschooling, or why did you choose to homeschool if you're already homeschooling? We would love to hear from you. We would love to get some of your feedback. If we missed something that was a reason why you chose to homeschool, we would love to hear about that. Okay, Scott, so what would you say was one of the reasons why you feel like you wanted to homeschool our children?
So I came at homeschooling from a very education standpoint. I had been in academics and education for my entire life. My career was an educator, and so I came at it from that perspective. Mm-hmm. I didn't necessarily think, I want so much more time with my family, because I was already working. Yeah. But I came at it from what is literally the best way to educate oneself, and therefore how best to educate your children.
Part of your reason for homeschooling is that you wanted to educate your children differently. So it's kind of more that academic, like you wanted it to look differently.
Yeah. I had such a good time learning. It's been such a huge part of my life. I'm a really extra curious person, and so when I saw children not being curious and not having a good time learning, I thought something was wrong, and so I came at it from that perspective.
And I remember you were teaching at a community college. You were teaching college level, and you saw adults who were just like done, like they hated it. You would bring something up and they're just like, no, like they hated it. And so I remember you coming to me and saying, what is going on younger, that we're like, how we're teaching the kids when they're younger, that's turning all these adults into adults who are like, I never opened up another book after I graduate from high school. Yeah. Or you would bring up, some of the people were looking for trades that you were teaching. They're like, I don't need to know about World War II. I just want to get this certificate. And
generally it was, they felt that the certificate was necessary, and this is all across the board. Whoever didn't like college, which was 98% of them, but generally it was that they just did not want to go to school. They associated school with boring and dumb and lame and unnecessary and all those negative terms that I just didn't feel. I didn't feel that. I was teaching history and literature and things like that, and I was so curious and fascinated about the things that I was teaching, and they weren't as curious about it as I was.
And we didn't want our children to grow up to be adults like that, because we're big believers in lifelong education. It doesn't end when you get a bachelor's degree, or it doesn't end when you get a diploma. Mine was a little bit different because I just came at it from a little bit of a different experience. As you know, or as we said in other videos, I was the one that was a little bit more hesitant at first because we had lived abroad, and I had tried homeschool before in the only way I knew how, which was public school at home. And I didn't have any resource. It was hard for me to find resources. There was no community support, and so there were just a lot of things where I was like, no way, and I had really, really little kids at the time, so it was really hard. And so when we came around to it again, after we moved back to the States and gone to school for about 5 years, had the kids in school for about 5 years, I don't know, there was a couple, I think I fit into a couple categories. One, I think, was definitely there were labels starting to be put on my children.
Yeah.
There was one that was like naughty, and one that was like gifted, and it was like, I didn't like the labels. I thought that really messed with their just natural, they just had different gifts and different talents, and I just really didn't like that labeling at such a really young age. I didn't like that. And it interfered with their learning, because they just were in that box. That's who they were now. And
it's how they gained confidence, and how they felt justified within the system was with some sort of label, right?
But
instead of just being, human.
At first I was worried about the naughty, but later I was worried, actually, after I pulled the one that was gifted. I found concerns about the gifted one too, and how that was stunting her actual learning. But another one for me was, I remember our oldest, she'd broken her arm, and the teacher kind of berated me. Is that the right word? She got after me, and she was really angry, and really I'd only pulled her out for a couple appointments for a couple hours.
It wasn't like a whole day.
No,
it was more just a couple times here and
in the next parent-teacher conference, she was like, "You are ruining her because she has missed so much school. She's so far behind." And I'm like, "What?" I don't know. That just didn't make sense to me. And I just didn't like that, how rigid it was. And I also was very heavily involved in the PTA, and I was like, half of the time you guys are at assemblies, or I don't know, there's just, because the classrooms are so big, there's just there's not very much time for them to go one-on-one. And so I don't know, I was like, this is my fault if she's struggling, but so those were a couple of reasons. Yeah.
So if I could add to it, one thing that I find interesting is that so far we've been talking about school. Mm-hmm. And I think the second we jumped out of the schooling system, we really started to just focus on learning. It wasn't school at all. Yeah. It was what does learning look like? Because I don't know, for you that are watching this video, you're thinking, well, I learn things all the time, and we do. We just do that as humans. We're learning all the time. We learn something off of YouTube. We read something. We are we're at work, and so we learn something new at work, and so we're always learning. And so that's what we found, was that the school system was trying to tell us what learning should be like. And once we kind of jumped out of that, we realized, that's actually not what learning looks like at all. This is just a really rigid way to try to help people learn. And I think drifted this system it did, and it had, and is still drifting away from what learning actually is. Because there's so many interesting and cool things about learning. Learning is, I don't know, just the word learning is different than school. When we say school, it's
and that's what it was. I mean, nothing against teachers or anything. It's just the system. Yeah. The system, and the teachers are stuck in it as much as anyone else. It's just the system. It's outdated. It works for very few kids. It just does. It just doesn't work for a lot of them. And even the ones where we think it works for them, there's a lot of stunted creativity in a lot of those gifted kids. And there's a lot of not really knowing who they are because they're really good. We were the best hoop jumpers. And there's just a lot of those who do really well in school. They're just really big hoop jumpers. And we were trying to see the bigger picture, like we said, and those weren't the adults we necessarily wanted to grow either. We wanted them to know who they were, know what their gifts are, to love learning, be curious. And we saw that being shoved out of all of them. So all of those reasons is why we, first pulled out of homeschool, and then we saw, community. We wanted community support, and we and it's one of the reasons.
That's what happens when you leave the public school system. All of a sudden you leave a community,
and so
you're kind of searching,
finding
where
a new
is
community,
my new community
for sure. And so that was, and we were really interested in seeing. Building on this idea that we had been exploring about what learning actually looks like, and on a larger scale. So we did that. That's why we created Knox.
So there are various reasons why people would want to homeschool, and we came up with a list we think that is fairly accurate as to why people decide to do homeschool. One of those is that they want to go at their own pace. They want to decide how fast they will go academically. Another reason is religious. Some people religiously feel different from the public system, and so they decide to do things differently.
So they can integrate their own beliefs.
So they can integrate their own beliefs so that they can sometimes go away from things at the public school that they don't agree with. Another reason is that people feel that they want to get away from negative influences that they might feel is at their public school. This is obviously very different for each public school, but sometimes there can be some negative things happen inside the schools. Another reason is that there are differing opinions as to what constitutes good academics, and so they differ from what academics are at the public school, and so they think that they want to do things differently. This last reason is another reason we would hear a lot, and that is that some people just want the flexibility to do things with their family that they don't necessarily get in the public system. So there's so many reasons why you might be thinking about or have already left the public school system. And reach out to us. We'd be totally happy to talk about your hesitations about leaving, and we talk to so many people about this, and so please leave your comments or send us an email. We'd be happy to talk to you about whatever is on your mind about this.
Tell
because
us about your experience,
it's
for sure.
It's a very visceral, gut-wrenching sort of
and
thing,
it's your
because
babies.
it's almost like,
it's your babies,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you know, there's just so many things where it is
it's
just part
so
of our culture
Yeah.
that it's really hard. And so we want to support you through this, and that's why we've created these videos, is to help you through these topics of so check out some of our videos of what learning looks like, but then also we try to address some of these topics that new homeschoolers are finding themselves in, or people are trying to thinking about homeschooling, that they're really concerned about, and they're totally valid concerns, a lot of them. So go ahead and put your experience in the comments below. We would love to hear about those experiences, and we will see you next week, and look for more videos about these topics.
See you guys in a week.